Besides their general lack of hairs, one of the other main identifying features that most wasps have is a very slender waist. In fact, there's a whole family of wasps called thread-waisted wasps, which have waists so thin it looks like a thread. And what those thin, very agile waists do is it allows those wasps to move and manipulate their abdomen in ways that other insects can't. And so that gives them the ability to kind of twist and turn their abdomen into the perfect position so that they can insert an egg and or sting their prey as needed. And so, again, most other insects don't have that kind of very thin waist that connects their thorax, which is their upper part of their body, to their abdomen, which is, of course, where their stinger and or ovipositor is. As we've already learned about wasps, really in their adult form, they only feed on nectar for sustenance. And so it's very important to keep in mind planting flowers, even as you're trying to attract wasps as predators into your garden. And wasps, unfortunately, they have very shallow tongues. And so unlike bees, especially some of our larger bees and say butterflies that have very long tongues that they can kind of roll out like a red carpet to feed on flowers, wasps don't have this luxury. And so again, like some of our solitary smaller bees, like we've already talked about, it's very important to plant shallow blooms, very easily seen and very easily accessed blooms for wasps. And some great examples of this is any plant in the carrot family, goldenrod, sunflowers, and echinacea all have really a plethora of very shallow, again, easily accessible blooms, so the wasps in your area can stop by, feed on nectar, and then go about their daily predating lives. They do pollinate flowers. They're called a secondary pollinator because they might not pollinate as much as, say, a bee does, or might not be as effective as maybe some other pollinators. However, just because there are so many wasps in a well-functioning ecosystem, kind of constantly patrolling, they do perform some pretty powerful pollination as well. And it's also important to note that while most wasps are predators, there are some non-predatory wasps. And actually a great example of this that most of us actually come into contact with, although it's secondhand, is the fig wasp. And now, interestingly, there are some varieties of figs sold in landscape stores that are self-fertile, which means that the plant can pollinate itself and doesn't require a pollinator. The vast majority of commercially grown figs actually require a single, very specialized pollinator to pollinate their plants. And actually, that pollinator is a specialized wasp, aptly enough, called the fig wasp. And now this is actually a fascinating life cycle, and we'll go over it just so you can kind of get a hint at, again, the close relationship between the fig wasp and the fig. And now what a fig is, the fruit itself, is actually, if you look at it closely, it's almost like a flower that's been folded in on itself. And so think of a fig almost like the center dish of a sunflower that, as again, we've already learned, consists of hundreds, if not thousands, of tiny little florets or tiny little blooms. And now what a fig is, it's basically that inside dish of a sunflower kind of folded in on itself. And so the inside of a fig, as it's growing and maturing, is actually full of flowers. And it's actually hollow on the inside with a tiny little hole entrance into the fig itself. And now what happens is a female will find a fig that is in the right state, the right time of year, and she will burrow into that tiny hole at the base of the fig. And now that hole is so small and so form-fitting for the wasp that usually she will end up tearing off her wings when she kind of crams herself into that fig. Sometimes she loses some legs too, and so it's usually just a one-way trip. She enters that fig, she actually lays eggs in and around the tiny little flowers inside that fig. And actually, when her young hatches, they feed on nectar and especially pollen from that fig. They actually mature inside the fig itself. And then before the fig is actually done maturing, both new males and females will emerge inside of that fig. And then actually, the males are quite different than the female fig wasp. Male fig wasps are actually blind. They don't have wings. They have specialized legs and mouth parts that are really specialized in doing one thing, and that's actually burrowing out of the fig. And so what happens is young males and females will actually hatch from their eggs inside of the fig, and the males immediately go about drilling a hole outside of the fig, so any new females will be able to emerge without harming themselves, especially without harming their wings or legs. And then new females will leave that fig and they will continue that process. And actually, that is the only way that most, again, commercially grown figs are pollinated. And so, again, when you bite into a fig, thank the fig wasp for making that possible for you and the farmers that rely on it.